In this episode, we're delving into the proof of financial support requirements for Canadian study permits. Demonstrating financial capability is crucial for a successful evaluation of your Canadian study permit application. Failure to prove sufficient funds to support your studies will result in rejection. Let's begin by examining some common reasons for rejections linked to inadequate financial support. The first rejection reason states, your assets and financial situation are insufficient to support the stated purpose of travel for yourself and any accompanying family member or members, if applicable. This is an indication that you have not proved that you have adequate finances to buy your air tickets, which is from your home country to Canada and from Canada to your home country upon completion of the program. Simply, insufficient assets and financial standing to support your intended travel purpose, including airfare to and from Canada. Let's move to another common cause for rejection. Pursuant to paragraph 220, subsection B of the IRPA, I am not satisfied that you have sufficient and available financial resources without working in Canada to maintain yourself and any family members who are accompanying you during your proposed period of study. This is due to the fact that you haven't demonstrated living expenses, which is the inability to show available financial resources as required by immigration regulations, which will lead to a rejection in your application as above. Now let's look at another rejection reason. Pursuant to paragraph 220, subsection C of the IRPA, I am not satisfied that you have sufficient and available financial resources, without working in Canada, to pay the cost of transporting yourself and any family members who are accompanying you to and from Canada. This again reflects that failure to demonstrate the ability to cover transportation costs to and from Canada without relying on employment in Canada can lead to rejection. These instances underscore the paramount importance of having ample financial resources in your application. Without proper financial documentation, rejection is likely. If you have noticed in all these instances, paragraph 220 of the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, IRPA, establishes the criteria for proving means of financial support. Let's delve into an evaluation of this section. The paragraph 220 reads, an officer shall not issue a study permit to a foreign national other than one described in paragraph 215, section 1, subsection D or E, unless they have sufficient and available financial resources without working in Canada. Take note of the phrase, without working in Canada, as it clearly indicates your funds need to be demonstrated, or you need to support the finances without factoring working in Canada. Let's take a look at what the subsections address. A. Pay the tuition fees for the course or program of studies that they intend to pursue. B. Maintain themselves and any family members who are accompanying them during their proposed period of study. And C. Pay the costs of transporting themselves and the family members referred to in paragraph B, to and from Canada. For your convenience, we've broken down this information into a graphical representation. This visual aid will help you grasp the necessary financial requirements more intuitively, making it almost self-explanatory. Additionally, we're going to bring these scenarios to life by discussing them in practical terms. In terms of tuition fees, this would be the fee involved that you have to pay to your designated learning institution, which can be found in your offer letter or letter of acceptance. Let's now take a look at the living expense breakdown. The table below indicates the minimum funds needed to support yourself as a student and family members accompanied with you. Remember, the funds required for your application can change with time. To ensure you have the most accurate and up-to-date information, we've included a link in the video description. This will direct you to the official website where you can find the current fund requirements. Keep in mind, the amounts we've discussed today are based on the figures available as of 4th of April 2024, the date this video was recorded. As per the table below, for a single applicant, the funds required would be $20,635 as indicated. Subsequently, if you're accompanying the spouse, the requirement increases to $25,690, as given in the table in terms of funds required for 2 people. Similarly, you can prepare your funds based on the number of people you accompany during your study period in Canada. In the transportation section, we dive into the costs of airfare for traveling to and from Canada. It's essential to demonstrate that you have sufficient financial means to support your intended travel, including the cost of your air tickets. A common question that arises is, how should I estimate my airfare back to my home country after completing my studies? To address this, we suggest making a calculated assumption by adding an additional $300 to $500 on top of the current return airfare. For example, if the current airfare is $1,000, you should budget for it to potentially be $1,300 or $1,500 when planning your finances for the study permit application. This approach helps ensure you have a realistic and sufficient budget to cover your transportation expenses. One of the main questions we often receive from students is, do I have to demonstrate the living expenses for the entire duration of my studies? To answer this, let's look into how the Government of Canada stipulates its guidelines. A link to the following information is given in the description. Students are required to demonstrate financial sufficiency for only the first year of studies, regardless of the duration of the course or program of studies in which they are enrolled. For example, a single student entering a 4-year degree program with an annual tuition fee of $15,000 must demonstrate funds of $15,000 to satisfy the requirements, and not the full $60,000 for 4 years of tuition. Officers should be satisfied, however, that the probability of funding for future years does exist. For example, parents are employed, scholarship is for more than 1 year. Applications for extensions made to CPCE must also meet this requirement. The key sentence to highlight in the above paragraph would be, officers should be satisfied, however, that the probability of funding for future years does exist, which means, although you have to demonstrate only $15,000 in the given example, you have to justify how you are going to source the $60,000 without working in Canada. Then, if you read further, it says, in assessing the adequacy of a student's financial resources, officers may exercise discretion in the documentation they request from applicants. In situations where student applicants generally pose a very low risk regarding funds, officers may choose to limit or waive routine requirements for documentary evidence. Low-risk applicants are more likely to be exempted from the requirement to obtain a temporary resident visa, TRV. Based on the known incidence of indigent and non-bona fide applicants and the reliability of financial documentation, individual processing offices are best placed to determine whether routinely requiring banking documentation and/or more extensive financial background information is necessary to ensure program integrity. Pay close attention to the statement. Officers may exercise discretion in the documentation they request from applicants. This indicates the critical importance of clearly demonstrating the funds required for your stay. If not, you're essentially leaving your application vulnerable to the discretion of the officer handling your case. Remember, the key is to satisfy the officer with your financial representation. Therefore, it is advisable to ensure you show the full funds necessary for covering your living expenses during your stay in Canada. Further, it states, in some very high-risk environments, reviewing and verifying the history of funds and supplementary individual or family financial and employment documentation may be necessary to ensure that only genuine students capable of supporting their program of studies are granted study permits. In the context of Sri Lanka, given the ongoing economic crisis and political turmoil, the country is considered a high-risk environment. Therefore, this situation necessitates extra caution and thoroughness when preparing your application. Let's now start looking at examples so you would understand the structure better. Take a look at the scenario below, which bears a tuition fee of $15,000, assuming you are a family of 2. Let's also consider the air tickets cost back and forth. Here's what the calculation would look like. In terms of airfare, the amounts entered are an average price of tickets from Sri Lanka to Canada at the time of making the video. As pointed earlier in the video, for the return air ticket, you could allocate an additional $300 to $500 and adjust for time. If you have already made a semester payment for your program, you're able to deduct that amount in your final show money requirement since you have already made the payment. Let's look another example, but this time, the details change. Assume you are coming for a 2-year program which bears a tuition fee of $15,000 per year, and you are a family of 4. Let's also consider the air tickets cost back and forth. Here's what the calculation would look like. Take a moment to pause the video and try doing the calculation yourself. You can always go back to the previous sections of this video to understand the calculation better, as we have clearly described the costs pertaining to each category. We understand that the content of this video may feel overwhelming at first. If you find yourself needing further clarification, we encourage you to re-watch the video. Taking the time for a second viewing can help you gain a better understanding of the proof of financial requirements discussed. Remember, it's perfectly normal to need a little extra time to grasp complex information. Thanks for watching. See you in the next guide.